Firstly, thank you, Ria, for this opportunity to speak with you and Dalit Camera. Um, Absolutely. Certainly, on the one hand, at the kind of quote unquote national level, the Poona Pact had a massive effect on the possibility of independent or Ambedkarite Dalit MLAs to emerge to success and to representation. This has been, borne out in all sorts of studies. Obviously, most importantly, B.R. Ambedkar's What Congress and the Gandhi Have Done to the Untouchables, which comes out in 46. And subsequently in the work of historians like Ram Rawat for the United Provinces, in my own work for Bengal. I've in my own analysis, I found that there was a certain to significant amount of kind of warping, right? That while there may have not been as substantial a number of Ambedkarite and independent Dalit political voices, what you did see, on the other hand, was that because of the two-tier kind of voting mechanism, the results of the elections were disproportionately skewed towards the success of Dalit candidates who were palatable to a caste-Hindu electorate. And as you, of course, would know that at the time, the caste-Hindu electorate was predominantly, kind of in the Congress pocket to some degree, the Hindu Mahasabha. And also something that should be borne in mind is that the the qualifications, who could be part of the electorate, was also skewed towards caste Hindus by virtue of education and wealth. So, all these factors in combination certainly meant that an independent or an autonomous voice, whether Ambedkarite or not, in Bengal, was unable to emerge. There, again, in my studies, I found that there were at least 3 to 4 to 5 candidates who performed very well at the primary election level, but who were subsequently kind of marginalized at the general election level. So I would say yes, absolutely. And not only at the national level, but also in Bengal. Right. Well, of course, after independence, the voting mechanism changes, and the Poona Pact and its provisions are effectively dissolved. I haven't personally gone into the electoral politics of post-independence West Bengal in tremendously great detail, but something that I have noticed is that the Dalit community, or it may be more accurate to say the Dalit population, they have always been sort of thought of as potential king makers, but never, potential kings themselves. Right, and this kind of cuts across the board depending on which political party you're taking into consideration, be it Congress, be it CPM, be it Trinamool, and obviously now the BJP. So this has been a kind of continuous feature of politics in West Bengal, and as you would know, that many people have pointed to kind of two facts that, this tremendous size, percentage-wise, of the Dalit population in West Bengal in the high 20s. combined with the fact that very few Dalit politicians or Dalit leaders have been able to emerge to the upper echelons of government in the state, and in fact, every single chief minister, from the very start, has been an upper caste Hindu. No, absolutely. I mean, I think Jogendranath Mondal's predicament during the 1946 riots, 47, was a very telling one. He had written to Amritabajar Putrika, many of the major Bengali-run dailies, and none of them had kind of deigned to publish his account of what was going on. And that was obviously because of the kinds of political ideological interests they represented, which, these were largely publications owned and run and operated by caste Hindus. So, you can appreciate why they would have been unwilling to publish an account of such a traumatic period that really challenged their own views of what was going on. This dynamic, however, is something that, plays itself out in post-independence West Bengal and post-independence India more broadly. There have, of course, been a lot of studies, a lot of anecdotal evidence about how the media industry is dominated by caste Hindus, is dominated by concerns that do not speak to the lives of Dalits at all, and how difficult it has been for Dalit reporters, for Dalit journalists, and for everyday Dalit folk to articulate their concerns in these mainstream dailies. This is something that, to the best of my knowledge, continues in West Bengal today. Of course, there have been, I think recently there have been a series of minor shifts. But nonetheless, I think the overall dynamic remains the same. And, newspapers, major kind of dailies in West Bengal continue to be run by the same social groups as before, continue to be prejudiced against the representation of Dalit concerns, unless it kind of blows up and it becomes a major phenomenon on social media, and then it's kind of rather instrumentally brought in. So in terms, I don't see a very sincere effort on the part of major media publishing houses to take on the concerns of Dalit lives in West Bengal. He was largely seen by many during the late 40s as a Muslim stooge, right, as a stooge of the Muslim League. Now, what this perception, I think, does, and I think it's a very unfair one, is that it forgets that he was a representative of the Scheduled Caste Federation. And he was in no way part of the Muslim League organization. He was trying to bring about, this fairly complicated alliance between the Scheduled Caste Federation and the Muslim League, and by extension between Dalits and Muslims. I mean, that had always been, well, not always, but that had been the kind of vision he wanted to inculcate. So the perspective that he was, basically playing second fiddle to the Muslim League, I think is a very inaccurate and mistaken one, because it overlooks, the historical reality that he was the leader of the Scheduled Caste Federation in Bengal. Even though the Bhadralok of, various decades, since independence have kind of disavowed caste, this is a very false notion, right? Because, of course, it's plain as daylight to see how important caste has actually been. Even though there's the claim that caste doesn't matter in West Bengal, if that were in fact the case, one would not see the kind of caste-Hindu dominance of society, politics, and cultural institutions that one has seen over the past 70 to 80 years, and certainly even during the colonial period. So that's number one. I mean, I think this notion that caste doesn't matter in Bengal is one that has to be kind of systematically kind of critiqued and in effect rejected. These days, I mean, as in the press, there's been a lot of talk about so-called subaltern Hindutva, and how the BJP has been able to rise in West Bengal because of the effectiveness of their outreach to certain Dalit and OBC groups. There may be, there's no doubt there's a certain partial truth to that. But I don't think one can basically attribute the rise of the BJP to OBCs and Dalits alone. OBCs and Dalits are a tremendously complex set of communities, set of biopolitical populations, and it's not the case that there's a kind of uniformity across these groups, right? They're kind of fractured along lines of certainly caste, lines of class, any number of striations exist amongst Dalits and OBCs. And on the other hand, what this kind of perspective overlooks is the degree to which upper caste Hindus themselves are responsible for the rise of the BJP. In Kolkata, in the suburbs, there's no shortage of evidence that caste Hindus are, in some senses, the bulwark of the of support for the BJP, and that they actually constitute, the bulk of the peoples who want the BJP to kind of arrive in West Bengal. You're right that the caste question, so to speak, has witnessed a resurgence, but I don't know if this kind of resurgence is something to be terribly happy about, because it's at least from an Ambedkarite position, it's not that there are Ambedkarite demands being made. To some degree, you might say certain leaders embody such a spirit, but I don't see them in any way as the kind of dominant voice within the Dalit community in West Bengal today. Right. I mean, I think this is precisely part of the problem, right? That in the progressive self-image, the idea of Hindu nationalism being part of the caste Hindu mentality is something that is, kind of at odds with their own self-understanding. But, if you look at the party leadership, the BJP party leadership in West Bengal, if you look at the kinds of cadres they have in West Bengal, certainly a lot of people are coming in from outside the country. But I think it's all too convenient to say that this is, the rise of Hindu nationalism in West Bengal right now is because of the subaltern classes. I think it disavows the amount of investment that caste Hindus have. And of course, there's that historical context as well, right? I mean, the significance of men like Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. This is also one of the major reasons why the BJP wants to capture Bengal, that they see it as a kind of return or a kind of final vindication of Hindutva itself, because so many of kind of Hindutva's founding figures in that sense, Mukherjee of utmost importance, originated from Bengal. And then you can go back further to figures like Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's plausible that the BJP would be coming to the forefront of West Bengal politics without the substantial support of caste Hindus. The BJP has capitalized on this, long-standing sense of frustration and resentment of Dalit refugees and the quote-unquote refugees in the border districts of West Bengal. And this has, they've, in their campaign speeches, in their agenda, they've really been pushing this argument. And of course, as a result, sharpening the tensions between Dalits and Muslims such as they exist. The Muslim question is also tied to this issue of appeasement politics, right? That Mamata has been appeasing the Muslim community too much, and this feeds into a lot of urban caste Hindu insecurities about how the state of politics and culture is changing. I mean, this is in some ways a question of great debate because, on the one hand, compared to UP, compared to Punjab, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, where you've actually seen the rise of explicitly anti-caste, Ambedkarite political formations that have made their presence felt in electoral politics. This is something that one has not seen in West Bengal, which often leads some observers to say that there is no caste question or there is no caste problem. I have I don't agree with that. I mean that simply because there's no expression in political electoral domains, that doesn't mean casteism does not exist. I mean, if anything, it might suggest that casteism is that much more pronounced and that much more ingrained. On the other hand, there is this, major and perennial issue of the various differences that exist within the Dalit population in West Bengal. There's been a tendency to speak predominantly about Namashudras, but there are so many other scheduled caste communities in the state. There are so many, and in fact, if you think of the bulk of the West Bengal population, the bulk of the, quote unquote upper caste amount to 4 to 5%. scheduled castes another 28-29%, depending on what figures you look at. But the bulk of the Hindu population in that sense is OBC. So there are these, very important question of what is the basis of solidarity across these groups. How do you bring about unity across these groups? There's no shortage of dissension amongst these groups, right? Whether, when it comes to questions of reservations, for example, when it comes to questions of various type of state benefits, state provisions. So, I mean, as much as one might like there to be a kind of a very vibrant and robust Dalit political presence in West Bengal, it seems to me that there are various obstacles standing in the way of such mobilization. Not to mention the something that doesn't get talked about enough, that the dominant political classes, the caste-Hindu representatives, have very little interest in seeing such a formation emerge. And so there's always the dynamic of co-opting and appropriating and kind of splintering the possibility of an independent Dalit political formation. The issue is of, related to this earlier question, the possibility that Jogendranath Mondal's life always represented was the possibility of Dalit and Muslim political unity. And this is something that, activists like Sukriti Ranjan বিশ্বাস, certainly Monoranjan Bapari, others could represent, right? I mean, even though it's not something that is very visible right now, who knows what the future will hold, right? I mean, if the BJP does come to power, if there are contradictions that emerge within the BJP formation in West Bengal, if there are alliances that can be crafted with, present day and, forthcoming Muslim political parties in West Bengal, that seems to be, to me, in some senses, the ideal or the promise of what Jogendranath Mondal represented. Of course, there's the issue that, this vision or this imagination was something that emerged in undivided Bengal, right? Where there was a massive Muslim majority, there was a very sizable Dalit population that hadn't been affected by partition. Of course, one of the major reasons for the so-called decline of Dalit politics in undivided Bengal and then early post-independence Bengal was, the cataclysmic effect of partition on the movement itself. And the kind of the separation into two nation states and so on and so forth. So whether these dynamics can replicate themselves in West Bengal is a different question. But it seems to me that is the possibility that Jogendranath Mondal holds out. And there is this. There are certain interesting changes that have taken place, right? I mean, for example, Trinamool having kind of provided funds for the Dalit Sahitya Sanshad. One can say that was a very instrumental move, that was basically a sop to kind of placate certain segments of the Dalit literary establishment. But on the other hand, that would have been unthinkable even several decades ago. So it seems to me, this question of progress towards radical Dalit political assertion in Bengal is going through a series of changes. And it seems to me there is potential, but whether that potential will be realized in the next decade or two kind of remains to be seen.